All right, so let's get started. We're going to talk today about hashes. So the objectives I want to make sure we cover today is explaining some differences between an array and a hash. We're going to talk about what a hash even is, and we're going to talk about common hash methods that we're going to use to access and manipulate data within a hash. And we'll also, we can't talk about hashes without talking about symbols in Ruby. So we're going to talk about a lot of different data types today, and you're going to be exploring a lot. So hope you're ready for that. So what I'd like you to do just as a warm-up is think about this. So I've got an array here called fridge items 1, and just read through these questions and just jot down your ideas. So we're just going to spend about 2 minutes doing that warm-up. Birds are coming. Can you hear that? The timer, like the crow cawing? Yeah, okay. All right, so let's have someone talk a little bit just about what their thoughts are. And I sometimes just like to call on people. So Shonda, do you want to come off mute and share a little bit your thoughts on why this list could be problematic?
Sure. So I would say it's problematic because it has multiples of the same type of food in the fridge.
Okay, so we have some duplication.
And so I would prefer to structure it like I have. Yeah, so I would prefer to structure it kind of like having, like saying 6 eggs rather than saying eggs 6 times.
Yeah, exactly. So some way to say like 6 eggs and 2 avocados. Yeah, I completely agree. And we had a delay there, which does not make me think my internet's working very well. Perfect. So I agree. And plus, if we think about like if you were at the store and you had this list in an array, and you were at the tortillas, and then you suddenly had to go, okay, hold on a second. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9 tortillas. I need 9 tortillas. But that's not very efficient. And so having it broken down or structured this way, as you mentioned, 9 tortillas, seems to make a lot more sense to me. And it's easier to read, right? And especially too, if we think about, well, what if suddenly, our party's going to get bigger and we need to add more eggs and some more avocados. Right now we have eggs up here, but we also have eggs down here, so it could get very confusing, especially think about if this list suddenly had 100 elements in it, it'd be very difficult to count everything up. Whereas here, if we know we wanted to add more eggs, we could just change the number of eggs that we want or avocados that we want. So this is the data structure or the data type that a hash will provide for us. So our solution is to use a hash. In other languages, a hash is called a dictionary. And I think that'll become apparent as we start talking about hashes. So what does a hash even look like? Let's create a hash of, examples. Examples are hard. Let's do items. Well, we can go to our fridge. Oh my goodness, overthinking things, friends. Fridge items, we'll call this fridge items 2. So a hash data type is made instead of with brackets, because brackets is an array, it's made with curly braces. So that's our indicator for an array. And then, indicator for a hash is curly braces. And then a hash is made up of key value pairs. Let me write this out. Properties of a hash. So curly braces has key value pairs. So the key value pairs are like what Shonda had mentioned, that this is how we would like our data to be structured. So what the syntax we would do is we can wrap the key, so our key would be eggs, for example, and it points to a value of 8. So this is a key and a value. This little guy right here, this equals and greater than sign is called a hash rocket. That's my most favorite term in Ruby, is a hash rocket. Right, so this is one key value pair. So if I want to add another key value pair, we need to add our avocados. We'd comma separated, just like an array, comma separated. So we can do avocados 5. And then we can do the same thing with tortillas. 10. Okay. So in looking at this hash, how many key value pairs do I have? You could just throw up the numbers in your camera. Cool. Awesome. Great. Yeah, so we have 3 key value pairs. So here, this is where it's slightly different than an array, right? In array, we have elements, and maybe this has, I don't know, I didn't count them all. Maybe this has 15 elements in it. They're comma separated. Well, in a hash, key value pairs are also comma separated, but each, if you want to think of them like elements, they're not called elements, so I don't really want to use that word, but it's a key value pair, it's a set, and it makes one thing inside of the hash. Am I breaking up or am I okay? Okay, some nodding and shaking heads, so I'm gonna assume I'm okay. Jake?
You're choppy.
I'm choppy.
Yeah, choppy.
Oh.
I do have so would each of the key value pairs be like its own object, or is just the fridge item an object?
That's a great question. The fridge item is a hash object. Now the key value pairs are made up of different objects. Like eggs is a string, which is technically an object in Ruby. This value is an integer, which is also technically an object in Ruby. The key value pair itself is not an object. So we do have a couple different objects going on, but I would say mostly it's the whole hash is the object that you'll be dealing with. Does that help?
Okay, so each individual one, just consider a key value pair.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. if this gets too bad, like my internet, I can tap in another instructor. So let me know if it's getting too choppy. Okay. All right. Sometimes technology is just the worst. All right. So in our hash, a lot of this can get really messy to read. So a lot of times we'll structure it. Oh, you know what? I'm going to put this in a Ruby file so we can actually see what's going on. So in my playground. So a lot of times we'll structure this by breaking apart the hash, lining up the keys, and separating out the curly braces. So this makes it a little easier to read our hash with its and see the distinct key value pairs. Okay. All right, any questions yet about this hash? You haven't learned anything yet. Okay. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how we can create a new hash and access that hash. So if you look here, I actually created a new hash just by, this is just called a hash literal because I'm literally just putting curly braces and that is creating my hash structure. Another way we can do it is by using, so hash is a class in Ruby, so we can call on that and call a dot new, and that will also create a hash. I want to put in a, oops. Oh, what's my keyword? It's pry, okay. All right, so I'm gonna run a pry so we can actually look at these in our pry session. What did I name this? Playground. So if I run my playground here, if we look at a fridge items, I can see my hash, and then I can also see another hash is just an empty hash. Okay. So two things we'll explore is if we have a hash and it's stored in a variable here, and we want to know how many eggs we have, we need a syntax to be able to query this hash. So the syntax we're going to use is called a bracket notation. It's similar to an array. For example, here, if we wanted to, with this fridge items 1, if we wanted to access the first element of this array, we would use a bracket notation with the 0. Okay. So we're going to use a similar notation here. And if we want to query a specific key and we want to know the value of that key, I'm going to do it in my pry here so you can see the return value right away. If I have my fridge items 2, I'm going to use a bracket notation and query the key of eggs. And what this will evaluate to is the value of the whatever key I put into the brackets. So the value is 8. Okay, so let me move this. All right. So what would I type then if I wanted to query the value of my avocados? Anyone know how I would query the value of my avocados? Carson?
Of the same way, just with avocados instead of eggs. Sorry.
I think Jen got impatient. Right, yes. So avocado. Right, just gives us 5. Okay. So what I'm gonna have you do is do a little exploration. And I know you don't know all the things about hashes yet, but that's okay. I want you to explore. So we're going to do some breakout rooms with about 3 or 4 of you. I want one of you to be the driver. So you'll screen share and type in the files. And a great way to accomplish the tasks that I'm going to put in your breakout room is to do it like this. Like put the hash in just in a playground RB file and put a pry in there so you can manipulate the hash in a pry session, because then you'll be able to see right away what the return expressions are, or the return value of the expressions. Okay, so all right, sorry, I'm putting this in your Slack channel. Okay, so the tasks that you need to do are in your Slack channel. So let me create these breakout rooms. Perfect, and we'll spend about 10 minutes in your breakout rooms. You might need to check on some resources and Google some things, or check different resources, okay? And then we'll come back together and we'll discuss this, but I want you to play with it a little bit first. Great. All right. So what questions came up during that session? Oh, Greg, right away. I love it. Yes.
So at the very, very end there, we were experimenting with, like, if you were to, let's say, assign an array to as a value to a key, how would you then access stuff inside that array through that key?
Yeah. So we're not gonna, that's a great question. We're not gonna explore that too much right now, because that's called a nested data structure, and we're going to actually have some classes on that. But to kind of answer your question, it's very, you have to take step by step the return values of what you're getting. So for example, well, let's just explore that, right? If I have my fridge items, well, actually in exploring this will help lead me to some examples of the other tasks that you had to do. So like Greg, for example, if I wanted to add, let's say a key of, what do I have in here so far? Eggs, I don't know, a key of like yogurt, and then I wanted to make the value an array of yogurt flavors, how would I do that?
So you do this like so in this case it'd be fridge underscore items underscore 2 dot store parentheses, and then the key, which will be yogurt, comma, and then an array of the flavors, either a string or whatever format you want to do for the inside the array.
Yeah. And so you could do it this way. I'll tell you, this is not the most common way you see it though, for adding a key value pair. Dot store totally works. In Ruby, what you'll learn is there's usually multiple ways to do a thing. Typically though, what you'll see is a bracket notation for this. I think your group did discuss the bracket notation as well. Can you walk me through that for adding the same thing?
I actually don't know about that.
Oh.
I didn't know that one, so.
Yeah, no worries. Let's phone a friend. Who wants to help me with bracket notation for adding a key of yogurt? Hope, go ahead. Hope, are you talking?
Okay, so for the bracket notation, we're adding yogurt. So we'll do fridge items 2 square brackets and then yogurt as a string, because that's what the other ones are.
Is yogurt's plural? Is it already plural?
I
think it's
don't know.
pluralized already. Okay, anyways.
And then we'll say it, and we're just saying what the value is, right?
Well, we can do that. So right now my value is nil, right? Because I don't have any yogurts yet. So actually that's a good point. We're going off on a lot of tangents here, which I think is okay. We are exploring these hashes. So if you query a key that does not exist in the hash, what is the return value? Well, we just did that, right? So it's nil. So jot that note down, right? You'll want to remember that with the hash. If you query a key that does not exist, you will get back nil. Okay. All right, so Hope, because we don't have the key of yogurt, I want to create the key of yogurt and set it equal to a hash, set it equal to an array that has strings of yogurt flavors in it.
Okay, so query that again, and then set it equal to the array.
Awesome. So we could do like vanilla and strawberry, strawberry, right? Cool. And now if we look at our fridge items 2, we'll see that now we have key value pairs that, oh, hold on, that's my timer squawking at us. Let me stop that. And then in a minute, we will take a palm. So this last one, we notice that the value of yogurt is an array. So here's my question. If I query now if I type fridge items 2 bracket yogurt, take a minute to yourself, take 10 seconds to think, when I press enter, what is going to be the return value of this expression? So think to yourself. Okay, and now I'm going to press enter. We're going to see if you are right. That's always a good practice, is to test your assumptions when you write out code. Say like, I think this will return X, and then press enter and see if you are right. All right, so it returns an array of the strings, right? Because when we query a key, it returns the value. And then what we can do in Ruby, I don't want to get too much into this because we're going to have a whole lesson on nested iteration or nested hashes and arrays. But now if I get back an array, I can call any array methods on this return value. So we can do Ruby chaining and do like dot first, and we'll get back vanilla, because that dot first is acting on the return value of this expression, which is the array. So dot first is being called on this array. Okay, if that's like, what, I have no idea what's going on, that's okay. We're going to have another lesson on that. Hope, you had your hand up. Okay, Garrett?
I'm good. I was putting it up just to suggest the thing you had just suggested.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Garrett?
so that's really interesting. So basically, yeah. I'm not sure if you're lagging. Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Okay. So you can't? You can. Okay. I just can't hear you, I guess. I think we're good. I'm just going to go ahead and ask my question. I think you'll get it. So basically, what I'm inferring from this is that any, you can essentially, like, depending on the like type of object that a key or value is, you can, or in this case, a key, you can basically use any method that could be used on that type of object on that key.
Yes, but think about it more in terms of like return values. So like, what would this expression be returning? And then whatever the return value is, you can call methods on that, right? So if we are doing fridge items like 2, and we're querying eggs, what data type will this return?
You're going to get an integer back. So like you could run any like, that's what I'm saying. Like you could run any method on, oh, I see what you're saying. So yeah, it's the return value. That's kind of what I was thinking. So you can run any method that could be used on that object type of the return value.
Right, exactly.
That's helpful. Okay.
Yep. And that's how Ruby chaining works. So you can chain like an unlimited amount of times in Ruby, like chain methods. You would just want to make sure you're calling a method that whatever came before returned will respond to. So that's definitely not part of this lesson, but I think that is a great question and great thing to know about Ruby. Okay, let's take a palm and then we'll come back and answer some more questions. So let's come back at 2:40. Recording's back up. I would love to explore other questions that came up in your breakout rooms as you were accomplishing those tasks. So what other questions came up, or if there's any ambiguity or you just really weren't sure how or why to do a thing, now is the time to raise your hand and ask. Robert?
So with the key value pair, is there ever a time when you would want to keep the value but change the key?
Probably not. Typically, keys will remain the constant. It's the values that would change. But, well, here's another thing. So values are going to be unique also. So if we have, got my little notice again that my connection's unstable, so that's always fun. If we have a key of eggs, we can only ever have a single key of eggs. So what do you think would happen, not just you, Robert, but everybody, if we did, okay, we have 8 eggs. So if we did this, so make a guess in your head right now. When I press enter, this is our syntax for setting a key value pair. Okay, but eggs already exist and keys need to be unique. So what'll happen when I press enter? Make a guess in your head. Okay, so let's see if you're right. Now let's check our hash. So it reset and overrid it. Oh gosh, what's the past tense of that word? I don't know. If you use a key that already exists, it will override that key value pair with the new amount. Okay. Let's see. What if I want to add 5 eggs to my current hash, but say I don't actually know how many eggs I have. So I'm not just going to reset it to 35 because I don't know how many eggs are in there. All I know is I got some more RSVPs to the party and I need 5 more eggs. Jake, go ahead.
This is a total guess, but would you do like the same thing where you do the eggs in your brackets and then plus equal 5?
Ah, plus equal 5, like that?
Yeah.
And Jake, can we take a look at the longhand? Because this is actually a shortcut syntax. Do you know what it's a shortcut for?
No, like I said, I was just guessing that's what I would try if, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, so you're very much right. So if we press enter here, and we'll talk about this shortcut in a second. So, and now if we query the hash, we'll see that now we have 35 eggs. So let's actually talk about that syntax real quick. Carson, I saw your hand was raised too. Do you want to tell me about what that syntax is shorthand for? So we did,
Yeah.
this was eggs and it was plus equal 5. How can I write this longhand? Can I change this to just fridge? I don't like writing the whole thing every time. All right, go ahead, Carson.
So I think you would want to do fridge bracket eggs equals, I don't know if you want to do fridge eggs plus 5 or, okay, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So here's what this is doing. So when you have a single equal sign, that's our assignment operator, right? And that will evaluate the right-hand side first. And then whatever the right-hand side evaluates to will be stored in whatever this is. So if we break that down, what this is doing is first, fridge eggs is going to query our hash and say, okay, there's 8 eggs. So 8 plus 5 is 13. 12, 13? No, 13. Math is hard. And then so this is going to evaluate to 13. And then this will look like fridge eggs equals 13. right? Which, as we saw over here when I did that with the 30, that's actually going to replace the key and reset it with the value of 13. So this plus equals is a shorthand for when this is the same thing as this. So if you ever had, like, say, x equals x plus 5 or something, that would be the same as saying x plus equals 5. So this plus equals is a shorthand so that you don't have to duplicate that variable. Should we take a look at this? All right, so, well, we can do both. Let's do both. So if I run this file now, and when I do fridge, how many eggs am I going to have? I'm making you do math now. I didn't start the palm timer. Hope says 18. Ooh, 18, she's right. Right, because we actually had this line in here twice. So we had 8, and then it added 5 to that, and then it added 5 to that. So we've got 18 eggs. Okay. Other questions? All right, so if there's no questions, we're actually going to do another breakout room and have you explore some more fun hash stuff. Again, we haven't gone over this yet, so you might need to lean on some resources and do some querying. Let me put it in your Slack channel. All right, so your new assignment is in the Slack channel. We'll spend, again, about 10 minutes here. I'm going to switch up the breakout rooms. And I'll check in and make sure you're doing okay. Okay, so you're all back. What questions came up? I'm sure there was quite a few. Let's talk about those.
I got a question.
Please, go ahead.
When talking about like that first example, is there a way to, I just don't remember, how do you call, if you're using the key, how can you find the, or if you're using the value, how can you find the key?
So there's ways to do that, but usually we don't go that way because values don't need to be unique, but keys have to be unique. So usually we query by the key and we do a lookup. And then it will give this, because what if this was 6, and then what if we had, I don't know, elephants, and that was 6, then how would it know which one to give? So usually I think it gives the first one. So usually though, we don't go backwards. You can, there's cases where you might, but you didn't need to do that in any of these examples.
Kat, what if you wanted to find all the keys that had a value of 6? Would you use a find all statement for a hash, or hash find all?
Yeah, I think there's definitely lots of fun ways you could do that. And using some conditionals would assist you with that. Oh, why is this not working?
Okay.
Yeah, we can get to that one. Let's answer some questions about what this is, though, because I kind of just threw that at you. What are we working with right there?
A hash.
This highlighted piece, George.
A symbol.
Yeah, it's a symbol. George, do you think, could you take a shot at explaining what a symbol is?
Oh, well, I guess. So it, thanks to Taylor, shout out Taylor, who did some research on this. It's unique. So it's similar to a string, but it's a unique value. And probably if Taylor could tap in right now, because he did the research on this, but we were talking about this in a session we had. So it, yeah, pause, pass.
No, yeah, you were right. At least from my understanding, it's a unique value, and it's just supposed to stand for something. And I think they're immutable also, so they can't change.
Yeah, so everything you all have said so far is correct. And so what I've done here is I've created a couple variables, and some hold symbols and some hold strings. So a symbol always starts with a colon, and they are immutable. So once a symbol has been established, that's what it is. You can't like change it. Like here, I can append to the string if I wanted to change it. Why this matters in Ruby is this can become more efficient in terms of memory, because think of these as kind of like labels. So what Ruby does, let me move my pry. What Ruby does is for a symbol, it stores it in one place in memory. And then if it sees that you use that symbol ever again, it'll just point this variable to that same place in memory. It says, oh, you already created this. Let's just refer you back to this memory location. Whereas a string, even if a string is exactly the same, it will create a new place in memory for every string that you create. So it's a little more efficient to use symbols. And we can see this if we do object ID. So this is kind of where it gets stored in memory. We can think of it like that. Object 2, I actually expect to have the same object ID, and it does. Order 3 should have a different object ID. And then order 4, even though it's the exact same string as order 3, it's storing it in a different location. So strings are a much more efficient data type. I think of them as labels. So anytime I want to label something, but maybe reuse that label multiple times, I would use a symbol. So very often in hashes, we use a symbol syntax. It's called pets. We use a symbol syntax to create our keys, because those keys are going to be unique. And then when we query those keys, it'll know exactly where to look in memory. So if you notice here, the way I have it written like this pets hash actually looks different than how it lists it right here in my pry session, right? The colons are moving around. So this is the longhand version, where instead of a string for the key, I'm using a symbol and then putting the hash rocket to indicate the value. But since we do this so often, typing those hash rockets out every time becomes very tedious. So this is our shorthand syntax right here to indicate that this key is a symbol and the value is a 3. Okay. You'll want to get used to all the different ways that you could see a hash, because these keys, again, it could be a string instead of a symbol. Could be a symbol. Could be a number. Like a key can really be anything. This is a terrible hash because the keys are inconsistent right now. You want to practice some consistency. So we'll make them all symbols. And now if I want to query, I want to see how many dogs I have in this pets hash, what do I need to type? If someone wants to come off mute and help me type that out. Todd?
And so which key were you trying to print out again?
Dogs. I want to know how many dogs I have.
Okay, so you would write pets. A brace, a bracket, okay, and then dogs.
Like that?
I would put a colon symbol after the S inside of that brace.
Hmm.
I think that.
Let's try it.
Let's try it.
I
Okay.
like it.
So maybe we'll put that colon in front of the D.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
There
So,
you go.
yep. So in Ruby, remember a colon has a symbol in front of it. When we can write our hashes like this, it's just a shorthand to show that this is a symbol. Because you could write it like this, a symbol and then a hash bracket, but again, that gets very tedious. So we use this shorthand and Ruby will convert it to this for us. So symbols always have the colon in front of them. Yes, great job. And so what if I did this? Think to yourself, everyone, what'll happen when I press enter now? Hey, you have a guess? Ooh, why did I get nil? Is that what you expected? Jake?
Yeah, because the dog symbol and the dog strings are different object IDs. So you're essentially searching for a hash key that doesn't exist.
Yes, great explanation. That's perfect. So remember the symbol is different. It's a different data type than a string. So in this query, it was looking for a string, a key of a string of dogs, did not find that. So it returns nil if it does not find that string. I'm sorry, if it does not find that key. All right. Garrett, go ahead.
So like in that situation, we got nil. And when I'm creating a hash, if I'm just creating it in like a pry, for example, I can create it such that it defaults to 0. But is there a way to like, without using pry, like create a hash structure such that I would get 0 instead of nil in this example?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is a way to create a hash with the default value so that when we query it for a key, and if that key doesn't exist, it'll pop out something other than nil. Did anyone find that in their research? Will?
Yeah, when you initialize it, if you do like, I don't know if we call it test hash or something.
Okay.
Then you do hash equals hash dot new. And then in parentheses, you do a 0. That'll, for example, I think initialize it so that your keys and values are integers.
Kind of. Let's test that. So let's say test hash. Obviously, there's no keys in here. So if we query it for eggs, I get back 0. Now it doesn't save that key in there, but this is just a way to set a default value so that instead of getting nil back, you get a 0. And that's a good thing to know because there might be situations where you don't want a nil value to come back.
So this is setting the original, like the original hash without any key value pairs to have a default value of 0.
Mm-hmm.
Does this also mean that as I add in new key value pairs to this hash, that those will also have a default value of 0 if they're not? I guess it does. So I think I get it.
Well, but think about your question, and let's try it. So if I wanted to add 3 eggs to this hash or set a key value pair, how would I do that?
You do test hash and then in parentheses, whatever the key was that you wanted to create. And then, in brackets, whatever the key was that you wanted to create, equals whatever the value of that key value pair is that you wanted. And that's how you'd create it. And then, for example, so now when we tried to call that using, for example, a string of eggs in the key instead of the original type of key that we created in, I guess now it will return 0 because we originally defined it as 0 instead of nil, or will we still get nil?
Well, so we just did two different things, right? So we just set a key of a symbol eggs to 3. Right. So I would expect that to exist, but the key of eggs still does not exist. So
right, that's what I'm asking about.
Yeah, it doesn't exist, so it's going to give that default value. Yeah. Yep. And then eggs, though, does exist now.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was asking because specifically in the example we were just doing, we were testing what happened when you used the wrong key and you got nil. So I was just curious here, after you've defined it as having like a default value of 0, if now we use the wrong key again, if now we get 0 instead of nil, which we do.
Yep.
So that was exactly my question.
If you initialize your hash with the default value, you will always get that default value if you query a key that doesn't exist. Keep that in the back of your mind, everyone. That'll come in handy very soon. All right. Let's also talk about the what we were trying to do. One of the things you needed to do was print out each key value pair to the terminal. So it would say like, there are 3 dogs, there are 6 cats. So will someone, I would actually like to call on someone because I feel like some people don't get any talking time. Hannah, do you want to, and you can say, you can refuse me. Do you want to come off mute and walk me through what your group's solution was to go through this pets hash and print out those statements?
Sure. I already kind of forgot what the question was. Can you rephrase it? It was, I think we did pets dot each do pet in the pipes. And then what were we trying to do with this again in that thing?
Yeah, we want to print out a string that says like, there are 3 dogs, there are 6 cats.
Oh, okay, I remember that now. Instead of pet in the pipes, we actually did key and value, and then we used string interpolation to, in quotes, put there are, and then we did key with the hash, yeah, and then value.
All right, let's run this and see if we're gonna get it. Let me take my pry out.
Oh, whoops, we did it backwards actually.
But this is good. And this is gonna allow me to make the argument for never name your block variables key and value. Instead, we still wanna be very descriptive about what this represents. So what does that key represent?
The animal.
Sure, we can say animal. And then what does the value represent?
The number.
Yeah, maybe the number or the quantity, right? And then we could pretty easily see there are dog quantities, like that is not quite what we're looking for. So we can flip-flop those. So there are the number of animals. And then that should, awesome. 3 dogs, 6 cats, 5 birds. Let's do this real quick. I want to put a pry in here. Actually, I want to put a pry in there, but do this. Okay. Did I call that? Oh, that's kind of weird. All right. So, the birds. All right. After this, we'll take a quick palm. So if, when we're calling an enumerable on a hash, you actually have a couple different options. In your block variable, if you just define a single variable, in your pipes, you're actually going to get an array that holds the key and the value. Okay, so each key value pair gets a single array. Or the other option you have, which is the one I think is usually the most helpful, is the one Hannah illustrated, where we get, because we have a hash and a key value pair, we get 2 block variables. So we get a name, one the key, one the value, but of course we use more descriptive names than key and value. But I want to illustrate that difference there between if you use a single block variable or 2 block variables. And with a hash, I'll tell you, it's usually better to use 2 block variables. Of course, it's always dependent on the situation, but usually you can be much more descriptive about describing what the data is when you use 2 block variables. All right, before we take this last palm, what questions do you have about this enumerable with the hash? George?
Yeah, I was trying to just do something silly or discover, and I was having John set that enumerable to a value, to a variable, and use map instead of each, just to see like what would happen. And so if you run it, you get a nil. And I was wondering if you could explain that. I mean, the logic is obviously like really silly. I was hoping it would be in like a bunch of sentences, but
yes, you're hoping,
but without the
work.
puts.
What? Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh.
It was like without the puts, and then we called test outside. We did like on line 22, puts test.
Oh, okay. So let's do this. If I run this like that, this is the same as putting test, right? I'm just in price, so I can call the variable. It actually does do what you want it to do. Right?
So we actually got nil when we checked the class of the actual variable test.
So you did like this? Let me do it like you did it. Wait, so you did puts test like that? Maybe without the pry?
Yeah, and then we did like, I was like, oh, that's different. And then we did a class to see what it was. And it was a nil class. I thought that was really interesting.
Like this?
Yeah. I think we were at that point in a pry, but I can't remember what we did. Anyways,
so part of what you might have experienced is that, because what's the return value of puts?
Oh, yeah, I don't know, but I would guess that's what I was getting was the nil.
Yes, because the return value of puts, if we just go into a pry, right, puts, hello, the return value of puts is actually nil, right? So it does a thing, but it returns nil. So my guess is however you had it structured, you were actually storing the return value of puts. Oh, maybe did you have it like this? Test equals puts. Well,
anyways, thank you. Yeah, okay, I'm glad that it is actually an array. That's what I was thinking it should be, but
I can't spell today. Yeah, and here's the deal though, is that enumerables on hashes don't always work as you expect them to. So where do you think is a great place to check what the return value of an enumerable on a hash would be? Anyone?
Ruby docs.
Yeah. Right. So we can check, sorry, thank you for raising your hand, Hope. So we can check our enumerables. And if we look at like, let's look at the map. Right. So map returns an array with the results of running block. So it doesn't matter if we call map on an array or a hash, it will return an array either way. Okay. Now some of these, it matters what you call it on. Let's see, I can't think of one off the top of my head, but sometimes it will tell you like the return value will vary depending on what type of collection you're calling the enumerable on, whether you're calling it on an array or a hash. But a lot of times it will just return the same thing. So it can get tricky when you're using this, using enumerables on a hash. So you just want to be sure of what the return value is and make sure you check that and that's what you're expecting and wanting. Any other, I liked this solution actually with the map. Any other questions about iterating over a hash? And then we'll take a quick palm. No? Okay, let's go ahead and take a 5-minute palm and then we'll do some more breakout rooms. So at 3:28, we'll come back. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah,
so I don't know if I can ask this question, but so I was just doing the practice assessment. I was hoping we would cover it in this class, but we haven't yet.
Mm-hmm.
And the very last question on iteration 4, it's asking you to call like .menu, and then the return is a hash of key value, like key values, but like the values have multiple. No, the keys have multiple values. Does that make sense?
No, a key cannot have a multiple value. A key can only ever have one value.
It has an array of strings.
Okay.
I just answered my own question.
Okay, I love it. See? And this is why, have you all heard the developer term of like rubber ducking? It's where you ask your question. Oh yes, Joan, perfect. He has a rubber duck. You ask your question out loud to a rubber duck. Because a lot of times voicing that question and talking through it out loud, you will answer your own question. So yeah, I love that. If you have other questions about that, Sydney, feel free to ask me later. Okay, so we're gonna do breakouts again, probably for about 15 minutes. I put a bunch of things for you to do in the Slack channel. And I do want you to do like code, because you know, some things that's like add a drummer to your hash. That'll make sense, or add a key value. Don't just go into the hash and like, you know, add it here, like adding alligators. I want you to do it like in code using the hash methods, including that bracket notation method to actually accomplish those tasks, okay? All right, and you can ask a question if you need to while I'm preparing the breakout rooms. Okay, happy coding. All right, what questions came up? And we'll review that the number 12, because that was a fun one. Kate, go ahead.
It was number 12, so I'm just gonna wait because 12, yeah, it's 12.
Okay, are there any questions before you got to number 12? And remember, I want you to feel comfortable asking questions, even if you're like, oh, I'm the only one who doesn't know the answer to this question. I promise you are not the only one. And you asking that question could clarify or solidify this information for someone else too. Garrett, go ahead.
Yeah, so when we were printing out the introducing basis name kind of thing, like we got it to work, but I just kind of experimented because initially like our thinking was, hey, it's a symbol. So when we're doing it, let's convert it to a string. So let's do like, you know, the symbol for roll, like roll dot, and then we just convert to string. And so we did that, it worked. But then I was curious, so I took out the convert and it still worked, and it still printed out like a string. So I guess we were just curious why, like, even if you just put it in as a symbol, like it will still in this scenario print out as a string.
Yeah, that's a good question. And, you know, I don't know that I know all the underworkings for that. But I'm glad you experimented with it. And a lot of times in code, like we're maybe not sure how something's going to work or behave. And the route you took to explore that is exactly what I would like for you all to do, is like then go to a price session and try it both ways and see what happens. I think for the symbols that they will just render as maybe not as a string, but if they're wrapped in a string, they'll render that way, like with string interpolation. but there could be some odd behavior. So I would agree that you would want to do like a 2S on that to change it to a string, just to be sure and it be explicit. Because I don't know if that behavior would be consistent across every type of symbol. Great question. Any other questions before we get to number 12? You're all just patiently awaiting for number 12. You all did, well, I was popping through the rooms though, and a lot of you came up with really great solutions, and a lot of them were very different as well. So I would love, does a brave soul want to come off mute and walk me through your group solution, and then we can talk about that solution? Kate, go ahead.
I'm happy to walk you through it, but we can't get it to actually run.
Ooh, even better.
Okay. Basically, we think we're overthinking this. We came to the conclusion that we were definitely overthinking it. Do you want me to share my screen?
What can you?
Or do you just want me to talk you through it?
Yep, talk me through it.
Okay, so first we just took the hash that we had created with all of the other stuff. So we were working in IRB, and I just used the last hash. So I just set new band to that hash.
Okay.
So we had a like bassist and vocalist and drummer. Do you want all those values?
No, it's fine. We could do it with just these values that I have.
Okay.
Can you all see my screen? Okay, yeah.
Okay, sweet. So then we tried creating a method. Basically, we created a method to do all of this. We just couldn't get the method to execute.
Okay. Well, we could do a method. We're not really in a class right now, though, so we can
Exactly.
Yeah. So why don't you give me the innards of your method?
Okay, so it might take a lot, and I don't know how to transfer this. So,
Do a method.
so we were taking, so the method was called add player, and you took in the role and the name. And we had an if statement that started with if in new band.keys. So new band.keys.include, and the include value was role. Then it output, sorry, role taken.
Like this?
Yeah, except the role is in parentheses.
Oh, sure. Optional.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, forget that that's optional. Somebody told me that. And then else was just running, adding the name and role with new band, square brackets, role equals name. So that was we have been working on our project for too long, and so that is how we were thinking.
Yeah, so you're actually not too far off. So new band.keys, right? What is the return value of new band.keys?
It's all of the roles.
Array.
Yeah, an array of all the roles, right? Of all the keys. And we can call .include on an array, and it passes this value, and it will check if that's included. If this evaluates to true, then we know that that role is taken, and this will execute. Right? If it does not find this will return false, and it'll go down the else branch of logic, and then you use simple hash manipulation to add that key and value pair to the new hash. So this would be correct. The issue here is with probably a scope issue. We'd have to move this stuff inside of here, right? And so maybe this isn't the best example, because ideally you'd build this inside of a class and you would pass it the information via a test. We're not dealing with all of that, but this would work and should work. You want to try it? Is that what we're waiting for? So if we call it, invoke this, and we pass it what no, I don't know. Trying to see, maybe I'll stick a pry in here so we can see what it does. And then if I run this file, so I'm at the bottom of it here. So whatever has happened has already happened. So if we check new band, oh, I should have had that puts. right? Which it should not have added anything. Hold on, this wasn't good. Let me do a puts here so we can actually see what it does.
Yeah, it did output.
Yep, so it outputted sorry role taken, and we can verify that it was not added to the array. I mean the hash, to the hash. So yeah, great job. Connor, go ahead.
Yeah, so I did pretty much the same thing, a little bit different logic, but we got the message to print, but we can't append the new member with a different job to the array, the hash array, or the hash. Sorry.
Oh, why not?
I don't know. That's what I'm curious about. It's not returning an amended new band hash.
And you're adding it like this?
Yep, exactly like that.
Yeah, let's try this too again with a different one, guitarist. We can add guitarist Jill and see if it does the thing. Oh, did it outprint my thing? New band. Oh, it didn't add it. What is my role? Oh, right, of course, because it ran the first line and now I need it to run the next one. I'll explain what just happened there. Okay, there's Jill. So when I ran my program, it ran line 47 and then outputted, I'm sure that's a word, sorry role taken, right? Because it hit this branch of logic. And then it, for the second one, when I hit exit, it continued execution and did this one, guitarist of Jill. Connor, we can do a screen share and look at yours, but before I do that, I wanna just take these two questions first. So go ahead, Kevin, and then Aiden, and then we'll kind of wrap up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that for the add player method, we actually added a third argument, which was hash. So then once we called it at the very end, add player, the role in the name, we also did hash as well, since it was out of scope.
So it, yeah, so I think the way that we structured this, because we're not inside of a class, you might have had some scope issues. Like if all these variables were outside of the method, is that what happened for you?
Yeah, we added like a third variable to our, not a third variable, third argument to our method. So it's role, name, and hash.
Oh, I see. You passed it in as one of the
Yeah.
arguments. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can
That's what we
absolutely
did
do
too.
that. Well, you wouldn't need to if we built this in an actual class, but for the sake of this, you could.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Thank you. And then Aiden, go ahead.
Yeah. So can in line like 49, can you check the hash again?
On 49 here,
Yeah.
you actually won't be able to see it because now
Right.
it's scoped to inside the method.
Yeah. So the thing I was talking about in the chat was that this method will create a new hash every time you run it, right?
Mhm.
And so it'll be completely reset every time.
Yeah, that's true, right? And so this is like you wouldn't build a method this way. You would have it inside of a class, and maybe the new band, actually, maybe it would be storing like its members in a method or something and be building it dynamically. But the other thing I want to hit here is, can anyone think of a different way to do the logic? This piece.
We built each loop. It just tested if the passed in role matched anything in there using an each loop.
You could do that as well. That's probably a little like using a jackhammer to do what a hammer could do, though. So let's.
We did find nil.
Could do that, Eduardo.
We use the bracket notation and then a conditional that it doesn't equal nil.
So like right here, can you walk me through that?
Yeah, so we did new band and then bracket role and then does not equal nil.
Okay, so I like that. So here you're querying the hash for that specific key, because remember, if it doesn't find it, it's going to return nil, right? What if we took this one step further, though? What if we flipped these and said, so if this returns nil, Oops, actually, we would do do we know this syntax yet? Let's keep it how you had it. Let's not get too crazy. Okay, so if it doesn't equal nil, or you could do if it does equal nil and flip-flop those, right? Either way, right? So, but this is utilizing the knowledge that if you query the hash for a specific key and it doesn't find it, you're going to get a nil returned. So you can utilize that instead of like iterating through or pulling out all the keys. You can just search for that specific key and then see if it's equal to nil, and then you could take it from there. All right. One last thing I wanted to cover really fast, and then I'll end the lesson, but then Connor, you can screen share so we can look at your code, is if we wanted to do a test. So I just wrote a really quick test here for a band class. If we wanted to do an assert equal for a hash, if I tried to run this right now, I'm gonna get some problems. Whoops. Oh, that's not what my band test needs to be called. Terrible convention. Okay, there we go. Anyways, my error is still the same. It's gonna say I have some weird syntax error with this hash. So in mini test, when you're wanting to do a test for a hash, you have two options. You can either wrap this in parentheses, right? And now at least we'll get well, actually I wrote the code so that it will return a hash every time. It'll work that way. Or what we can do is set this equal to a variable and then just use the variable here. And then that will work as well, okay? So mini test acts a little funky when you're trying to do an assertion with a hash. So you have to either do parentheses or use a variable, right? So that's just something to note. All right, so we covered a lot of hash stuff. You're gonna see hashes for the rest of your career in Ruby. And if you work in any other languages, they're gonna have hash-like structures. They might just be called different things. So you wanna get very, very comfortable working with hashes. So if you haven't already finished the Ruby exercises on hashes, this would be a great time to spend a little bit of time in those Ruby exercises, okay? All right, we are 3 minutes over. I'm going to